Friends, this is Jeff. We're relaunching our online Enneagram discussions. Many of you have joined me for these before, but this time I'll be co-hosting with Katie Whitlock. Our first workshop is this Saturday, and we will be discussing our type and excess. Your motive, your type, is not bad, but our motive can become destructive when its addictive qualities take over and when they start flying our airplane. So we're going to talk about the low side of our motive and talk about strategies for taking the wheel back. And this is happening Saturday, November 1st, this Saturday, 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 Eastern, 4 p.m. in the UK. If you suffer from insomnia in Australia, we'd love to have you in the early hours. Our first two workshops here are going to be free. We're expecting no less than 40 people. After that, we're going to be meeting the second Saturday of every month through 2026 for our members. So go to aroundthecircle.org. The link is in the show notes. Sign up, log into Zoom, get registered. We're looking forward to seeing you this weekend. Hey friends, it's Jeff. I'm here with Christa Harden. She is a chai drinker. She's a movie lover. She's a writer of books. She's an Enneagram 7, and she has a very impressive collection of podcasts on marriage and Enneagram. Christa, we are both lovers of British literature and Tolkien, and we're talking instincts and relationships today, so I'm thrilled to have you.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much, Jeff. I love hearing this news about Tolkien, and I love your pod, so thanks for having me.
I was a philosophy professor in a former life. Although once you're a professor, you're always a professor. So I get to keep saying I'm a professor. But I used to do philosophy and Tolkien, and love the hell out of that material. So.
Oh my gosh, notice I zeroed right in on that. Nothing else. I'm like,
Yeah.
What? And that's when you know you have a fellow LOTR nerd with you. I love it.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. Well, in future conversations, if we want to go down those roads, count me in. So
awesome. Thank you.
Well, we're talking about relationships, marriage, and the instincts. And for many of you will know this, like TJ and I have dabbed our toe into instincts, but Christa is writing a book on instincts, and so she's going to be the instincts master here for us. I would love to talk about relationships and marriage to start us off. It may sound very basic, but when you come to the topic of relationships and marriage, what are some of the primaries for you? What are the big ideas that kind of move you forward into that space?
I love that question because it isn't just Enneagram. Often I bring in the instincts, but even just basic cues that I learned way before I learned the Enneagram, which correlate with the instincts. So for instance, self-care is a major piece of marriage and relationship work because you can't start doing relationship work unless you have the basic window of tolerance work done. And so that comes into the self-preserving instinct. So we'll talk about instincts as we go on, but I just want you to know I've always layered my relationship work with that piece of self-care because I could just tell working with couples that it never worked to conflict resolve or anything if they had absolutely zero love tokens in their bank, if you will. So that's something I focus on. And I also focus, of course, on that sexual connection and the deep conversations and attraction and what that looks like. And then not just leaving people there, because I think perhaps as a type 7 myself, it feels a bit boring to stay right just those two things. I also love when I get a chance to bring people into deeper conversations with each other about how they can use their gifts to help others in the world, mutually and also individually. So those are some spaces that my clients and I and my friends and I often are talking about together.
I have heard you use that trajectory before. It feels prescriptive, which one that I love. But I heard you use the metaphor of an airline catastrophe, as it were. You're up in the airplane and they tell you have to put on your mask first. Yeah. And then you can care for the person next to you. And then perhaps you can care for everybody else on the plane. And coming to relationships, saying when we come to relationships, we need to look at ourselves first isn't normally how people think about coming to relationships. But that strikes me as a healthy posture. You can't be in a relationship if you have not done work on yourself first. Is that what I'm getting from you?
Yes. And it isn't even just this high level, let's be selfish and put ourselves ahead of others. It's survival. And so I grew up with a mother with schizophrenia, and she didn't put herself first. And she showed me that by example, that she learned through therapy and taking her medication compliantly, that she could become an amazing mother. And she was. By the time I was 2 or 3, before I have any memories, she was already in those spaces with me. And so she was already healthy. But she told me, this is how I'm healthy, is I forgot myself and I put my husband before me. And in her faith culture, that was what she was thought was the right thing. And it
Right.
was really her trying to be that good girl. And it ended up really hurting her. So just watching her, hearing her story, I just came to learn that through her example to me, to love others as unconditionally as is possible. But if you count yourself out, there will be nothing left of you. So it
Right.
is a big safety piece for me, not just like this fun, light 7. Although it can certainly look that way when you see me having fun and rocking out to Tolkien lore or something at a Comic Con or something. But like generally speaking, it's because I'm going to be back in that room with my clients and it's going to be heated and intense. And I have to let off that stress too.
On taking care of yourself first, one of my favorite analogies, I'm sure I've written it down somewhere, but it's something to the extent of, there's a very famous basketball coach who coached for UCLA in the 60s and 70s, had a huge winning record. Every single time he had a new class of athletes come into his space and he was starting out teaching them, he would pull out a sock and he would show them, this is the sock. This is how you put on the sock. The sock has to have no folds, no creases. When you put on the sock and then put it into your shoe, you need to be very, very aware of how this is taking place. That not only gets you into your body, but he ends up saying the reason is this is the foundation for every single thing that you're going to end up doing on that court. And if you get a blister, it will affect everything. If you get a hot spot, it'll affect everything. If you're uncomfortable in your feet, it'll affect everything. And that is, at least resonates for me, because I sometimes have a very difficult time turning inward and saying to myself, I need to really do some strengthening of myself for the sake of everything else. And that's what I hear in your analogy, as it were.
Yeah, I love that. And it's a good reminder for any of us who are really fast moving types too. And I know ones
Mm-hmm.
are as well. And just to take our time because our posture might be off if we're moving too fast. So that really speaks to me too.
Bang. Well, we're not just talking about relationships and marriage, we're also talking about instincts. When you come to instincts, how do you define instincts? What's the big idea for you here?
I think they're survival desires and needs. And so I think that humans have 2 layers there. And again, we're being a bit prescriptive. This is theoretical. So we have to do that with humans. We can never be an exact science. But in general, I think our instincts are really our deepest desires for how we think the world works and how we want to thrive and survive. So we need our food, water, we need our creative. Sometimes there's just different ways of allowing ourselves to have that mimicry with others or to connect with others. And then we also need that social giving. How can I use my purposes in the world? I think it overlays Eric Erickson's stage of psychosocial development, a bit of Abraham Maslow's ideation, and whatever theoretical frame we find, we always come back to these ideas of we need some time to play. We need some time to parent and to share. We need some time to just adult and relate. And so the Enneagram Instincts is one beautiful lens for helping humans to know how they can survive and thrive.
Yep. I think that's well said. I put a high emphasis when I come to instincts, a high emphasis on what I see as one. It strikes me as a biological category. This isn't necessarily like a quote unquote a spiritual category
Yeah.
first. It feels
Mhm.
like this is coming out of our physical wiring, and it
Yes.
feels to me very social. And
Mhm.
I think I'm on the edge here, but I don't know that others would hold this, but it strikes me that instincts are social energies first. That I have a relationship with the tribe, I have a relationship with the one in front of me, and then I have a
Mhm.
relationship with myself. And of all things, it's social energy that is funneled into one of those 3 spaces. That's at least
Mhm.
how I come to the topic. Would you have
Mhm.
any pushback on that, or
Mhm.
anything you want to plus?
I think it's hard for us as humans to do anything like you said, without some symbiosis. And I was actually teaching my son biology recently. I homeschool, and we were looking really deeply at that concept and watching symbiosis on videos. And so I do think you're right that there's a lot of that within these instincts and desires, that it comes to us through how do we live in this world with others. We could not do it alone. So even like you said, when we're doing our self-preserving instinct, which we know there's those three instincts, I know your listeners are familiar with those, most of them, the self-pres, the sexual, and the social, they're all going to ultimately have something to do with others. So I love your take on that. That's very unique.
I suppose to go further into the biology of it, instincts is a real common way to talk about the behavior of animals. So, you know what? Birds fly south for the. I don't have an instinct to go south for the winter, but birds do.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I don't have an instinct to birth my young on the beach, but turtles do.
Right.
You know, and the instinctual. This is almost a subconscious. I assume it's actually a subconscious. It's something that's not like. The bird isn't saying to themselves, should I stick around or should I go? This is the wiring is here. When coming to the instincts in terms of talking about Enneagram and how human beings come to instincts and instinctual variance, do you see this as wiring or is it something else?
I think that there's the social element, but also because I love that you just labeled that, so I don't want to forget that. But I think that there's an awful lot of biology at work as well. And family epigenetics, we're learning just a little bit about that. I try to stay attuned to the research, and it's neat to see that we're learning, yes, we actually have proclivities for different things genetically. And I know we have people who are more gene theorists and some who believe that it's more about our environment. But I think that the good news is with humans, we have been able to move around in these instincts a little bit, because when we get into relationships, if we're very locked into one of them, that can be very problematic for our family and our partnership, because as we all know, we need self-preserving, we need sexual, and we need social. And unfortunately, because of some of our traumas, sometimes we do get very locked into one of them, and it can cause a relationship rupture, and that is very damaging. So it's nice that as humans, as biological as it is, thankfully we've learned about neuroplasticity enough to know, oh my gosh, we can make changes, and that's exciting.
Epigenetics and neuroplasticity are great terms for us right now. I assume just because I don't want to I want to build off that real quick, but just to with neuroplasticity, I assume it's the case that you mean that you can change and
Yeah.
you can choose to change.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there, there's so much to say about how the will to change works and where that's coming from.
Right.
But at the very least, I think you
Mhm.
all, I think that you and I and TJ would hold a similar view of how instincts work, that they
Mhm.
are not hardwired. They are more fluid. Is that what I'm hearing in terms of
Yeah.
plasticity?
Yes, that it's hard to change them, but we can do it with baby steps, with 1% better, with learning, with insight, and then putting the changes into practice. This is exciting that we can now see we humans don't have to stay stuck in our patterns that are not working for us, including
Yeah.
and especially, like you said, this thought before that we may have fully despaired about, like, we can't change our biological drives. And like you said, the turtles probably can't, but we probably can as we're learning.
Yes.
And that's very helpful.
Yeah. This, by the way, goes. I mean, I'm going to nerd out for a second, but this goes back to Aristotle. And Aristotle's definition of human beings is that we are rational animals, and that is the rationality comes into play in that we can make choices about our futures, and we don't have, quote unquote, we don't have instincts to guide us in the same way that other animals do. We paired with the instincts that we have, we likewise have rationality that
Mm-hmm.
can ask questions. Is this a good way for us to go? Is this a bad way for us to go? Whereas
Mm.
animals seem to be guided almost exclusively by instinct.
That's really true. Yes, I love
At
that
least
reminder.
At least that was Aristotle's view. I'm not sure if that would
Yeah.
be disproven because obviously animals can be curious and they can be
Yeah.
inquisitive and they can discover things. So I don't know how that works, but
That's true. That's good in general, though. I like
yes,
that
in
because he
general.
was giving us a lot of basics and then we've extrapolated a lot from him, but we
Yes,
changed some of that.
right. But
Thanks.
cats don't have rationality, for example. They throw up on your shoes, they jump on your face when you're asleep. This is their instincts. And
Yes.
it doesn't matter how much you try and reason with them, they will
Yeah,
still try and make your life miserable. That's the nature of cats.
it's true. We love them still.
Transitioning to Enneagram, there is an element I would love to float this to you because it seems like you can do foundational work with me for a second, and this is where I buzz. We can choose to become someone else, but that's going to come from somewhere. That will come from something deep inside of us that
Mhm.
is our wants, as it were. So one famous philosopher says that you can do what you want, but you can't want what you want. And if you
Mhm.
want to change, those wants are coming from someplace. And in my
Mhm.
view, it's coming
Mhm.
from your Enneagram type. Enneagram type is just a shorthand language for describing your deepest motives and how they influence your behavior.
Mhm.
And when you come to Enneagram and you come to the overlap of relationships and instincts,
Mhm.
uh, what goes through your mind?
Hmm. I think about how I like how you first of all said you think that our Enneagram type goes very deep. As much
Mm-hmm.
as we know personality sometimes is front brain, that is the us that distinguishes us from a lot of these animals we were talking about. So it's interesting that we have this most developed frontal cortex that gives us this personality. And I think that I'm really reminded that along with these deep biological and epigenetic sort of desires to survive and thrive that we talked about with instincts, pairing that with our unique, nuanced personality does give us more of a sense of who we are and what we want and what our lens is for seeing the world.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad we both, and all your listeners, I'm sure, love the Enneagram for that exact reason that we can really figure out who we are and what we feel called to do based on our type.
Mm.
I love that.
At some point, we'll need to talk about called to do and how that overlaps with Enneagram type, but I would
Yeah.
strongly affirm that. Uh,
Oh, yes.
well, let's get into the Enneagram. I pitched to Chris offline that I'm really into affect groups, harmony triad recently when it comes to relationships. This is for
Mhm.
TJ and I, this is our shorthand for how we connect, how each of the types connect. I'm going to give
Mm.
just a real brief overview and then we're going to talk about how it overlaps with instincts. But ones, fours, and sevens all pull people into relationships.
Mhm.
Sevens are pulling people into their thinking. For example,
Mhm.
with multi-hundred podcasts, that's drawing all sorts of people into thinking about relationships better.
Mhm.
Ones are going to pull people into action. Fours are going to pull people into their emotional life and center. Twos, fives, and eights expect rejection in relationships, and so they're going to offer gifts that test the waters and look for connections through what they offer. And three, sixes, and nines connect through creating spaces for others, safe spaces, successful spaces, harmonious spaces.
Mm.
That's my shorthand, very fast description. We can build on that. But in
Yeah.
terms of how the types connect to other people, this is where relationship happens.
Mm.
And that seems important. And when
Yeah.
you overlap the instincts with them, it's going to be powerful, I bet. So
Mm.
you
Yeah.
started with self pres.
Mhm.
Anything to say about affect groups, or can we jump towards some of the self pres overlap here?
I love your take on those and how much it's about relational cues. I've often heard of these affect or harmony groups and studied it as the ways we bring our worldview into relationships. So just hearing your fresh take is
Mm,
neat and refreshing. And I think that there is a lens we can see both of these groups in if people are wanting that deep dive with us. And I just want to clarify for everybody that there are, multiple ways of looking at relationships through the lens of the Enneagram. And these are two that I think go together really well. We have that self preserving sexual and social desire. How do those fit with the harmony groups? Is that okay if I give an idea about how I think they fit together?
absolutely.
Okay. So I think that if I think about this in terms of, I mentioned earlier Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and just picturing that triangle. For some of you, you saw that in a high school or college textbook, and some of you dug even deeper. Some people think Abraham Maslow is very self-preserving, and that's why it's this way that he has it. But either way, I think that when I think of I think of the instincts also from this lens of thinking about this triangle or a mountain, is what I think of it as. And so I tend to think of the self preserving instinct as that biggest layer on the bottom, just because
Mm-hmm.
you heard my family story. It fits with my narrative, it fits with my grandmother's coming through the depression and her stories of survival. There's just a lot of those kinds of stories in my family line. And I think that from whatever reason, many of us who have that self preserving proclivity, we just really need to start there. And somebody else might say, Krista, it's exact opposite. I have to start social. So just hear me out that I think that the 3, 6s, and 9s, that first, group on the bottom would be right there in that self-preserving space, because we think of them as people who are, like you said, gathering resources for others, helping others on the ground, very grounded group of people. They know what's happening in culture. They're very good at connecting in culture. They're just the first to know what's going on, the styles, the shows. They also really like to stay resourced. And so when we think about our 6s wanting to feel so safe, and our 9s wanting to feel so comforted, and our 3s wanting to have the best of the best things, we remember this is a great part of life, and they're really good at these preserving of self sorts of things, just keeping us practical and not in that relational or ideal space always. But of course, we still have our heart type 3 that's going to be relational there. And every one of us has the capacity for all the 9 Enneagram types in us. So hear me out lastly when I just say, we can't be purists with this. This is theoretical. There's always going to be some holes. But that's a helpful analogy for me. And then, I know we'll want to comment together, but the 2s, 5s, and 8s, those relationalists or that rejection group, I think of them as middle center, very focused sexual instinct, and kind of chasing each other in a pursue or distance or dance around the mountain. Like you said it well, like, will you reject me? Will I reject you? This is where attachment work comes in. And this is the sexual instinct of attracting and pulling and really merging at times, and then hiding at times, and then hurting each other at times. The kill or be killed instinct, if you will, coming around the mountain sometimes. And then I think at the top is, we would think of Maslow's self actualization. The 1s, 4s, and 7s are the idealists. As you said, we want to share socially. We want to give people this ideal. We want ideal for our relationships and ourselves. And we want to be kind of proclaiming that from the top of the mountain. I remember being a little girl standing on my McDonald's or some sort of fire station and just standing up at the top and wanting to kind of preach to all of my little Mapletown animal figurines and Barbies. And I was like, okay, obviously I have something to share. Now, thankfully, us idealists, we're all learning. We have a lot to learn too. Oh my goodness. But these are lessons each of us has to learn, right? The 3 and 6 and 9 have to learn. Come up. You don't have to just stay grounded all the time. You can have higher hopes. And then some of us in different spots, we can say, let me humble myself. So those are some ways I've thought about how the 2 correspond.
Yeah. Overlap in terms of what wants priorities with the instincts. Now, you're not saying that all 1s, 4s, and 7s are socially instinct dominant.
No, I'm just saying we have a social desire to share our opinions with others.
Mm-hmm.
What we believe is best. We want positivity, or we want the ideals, and everyone should be authentic like me if I'm a 4. And, everybody should value the good that I value as a 1. And so we are strong in that way. We're a very opinionated group, as I've come to learn from my clients who are also in these spaces with me.
Bang. I would love to, let's talk about the 3 variations for 3, 6s, and 9s and kind of walk through, because I feel like you and I are going to land similarly in terms of saying something like there needs to be a balancing. There's not, I'm a sexual 1. There is, you're a 1 with some gears to shift into as life happens, such that it makes you a self-actualized, fully flourishing person Would you
Mhm.
be willing to affirm that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we really want to have a balance of be at our healthiest self, which is never going to always happen, but also even within the three instincts, we would just say whatever our type is, that we really want to make sure that we're healthily balanced in our sexual, social, self-present instinct, however it looks
Yeah.
like. Or even we just talked about those harmony groups. We would want some idealist in us, some pragmatist in us, and some relational part of us. So that's really neat how the Enneagram is always bringing us back toward some balance.
Yeah. Perfect. As a total footnote, this is one of the reasons TJ and I routinely say you should wait on instincts for 5 years, because you should really do some depthy work on Enneagram, in our view, without this layer first. Most people don't
Yeah.
go down same roads we do on
Yeah.
this front. But I would want to say one of the reasons is exactly what we're saying, is that this may not be part of typology. Your
Mm-hmm.
instincts are part of you.
Right.
You you have a self-preserving sexual and social instinct that are obviously in combination with your deeper, in my view, desires that are expressed through your
Mm-hmm.
type, your Enneagram type. And so, but naming how they materialize, that can be incredibly helpful. And it also strikes me as being advanced, and that's just my take. So, um,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of three sixes and nines, I think you were outlining this exactly right for the self-pres instinct. Three sixes and nines, in my view, are creating spaces for others, but they're doing so for themselves at some level.
Mm-hmm.
Sixes are creating safe spaces for others so that they themselves can be safe. Nines are creating
Mm-hmm.
harmonious spaces for others so that they themselves can experience calm. Threes are creating safe spaces or successful spaces for themselves so that they themselves can gain and garner the attention that is desired for them. And that, in terms of self preservation,
Mm-hmm.
that may look like a more social activity, but it may be coming out of a deeper spot that if I do this outwardly, I'm doing it for the sake of others and I'm doing it for myself. You have thoughts on self pres
Mm-hmm.
and the with the pragmatists?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. That there's a really important part of them that wants to feel safe or relational or, calm. And so just knowing this is part of my motivation and it's good. We don't
Mm-hmm.
have to make it bad. We can just name it. But also, you said something really important. If you're listening and you're in that space and you're hanging with us in these deep conversations, which we both already said can get complex, know that it's important for you to also look at other parts of life, because we can get very locked in to just doing the one thing, and that's what really can get us in some trouble, is just only celebrating this is who I am and this is what I do, versus saying, okay, this is who I am and this is what I do and there's purpose in that, because there is, but also what else can I do so that I don't lose myself in just trying to stay calm all the time or self promote all the time or create safety all the time. So those are important spaces for anyone who is either a 3, 6, or 9, or it maybe you're another type, but you're self-pres and you see that about yourself. And you say, oh, yep, you've just nailed it about me. I do that a lot. I'm really working so hard to make everyone feel this sense of comfort and safety and taken care ofness. But I'm missing sometimes actually the heart of the relationship or doing good in the world because I'm so locked into this one level.
Mm-hmm. Well said. As three sixes and nines engage that sexual bonding gear, it seems like that priority simply is funneled into the one-on-one connection with the person in front of them. So I want us to feel safe. I want us to feel successful. I want
Mm.
us to feel calm. The six is going to be interesting on this front and worth talking about, given the language around counterphobic sixes. But what do
Mhm.
you see with three sixes and nines
Mm.
in that sexual space?
Well, I think if we were to, I think it'd be helpful to go with that mountain analogy and just picture somebody in that bottom rung, like getting all their gear on for the hike and now they're climbing up. And I just think that, yeah, there's going to be all of those same things, but we're now adding to it that they're also caring deeply and this is healthy. This would be healthy for us to say when we also can put on a taking care of ourselves lens and a sexual lens. We wouldn't want to leave one behind for the other. now we also start to care about relationships. And like you said, it might just focus around comfort and safety and, that self-sufficiency or partner, taken care of. But it's even better when we can start to say, okay, now how do we relate in fun, interesting, exciting, creative ways?
Mhm.
How do we protect ourselves from other tribes? I mean, that's merging both the self-pres and the sexual together. Because sometimes there's, as I mentioned, that kill or be killed instinct, like us needing to protect me and you in that one-to-one space versus somebody else getting into our boundary. And that could even be thought of as some social acuity. But either way, once we climb into that sexual space, even with each other, there's a dance of how do I, as a 3, not lose myself from completely merging with your ideals of me since I put masks on? And as
Yeah.
a 9, how do I not, just because I'm so thoughtful, consider you before me? And as a 6, how do I not worry so badly that someone will attack us that I lose sight of us? And so I think those become, because we're going nuance now, also important considerations.
That's an excellent word. Of all things, I'm realizing as we're talking how infrequently I personally speak with ones, fours, and sevens on this podcast because I'm always the prescriptive one. And nobody else is ever prescriptive when I'm talking, and I'm very actually I'm energized by the
Yay.
encouragements that I'm hearing from you, which is normally my wheelhouse, and so it's taking me
Yay.
off course. The I I love what I hear in your language there is that as you get into that bonding pairing instinct, you are bringing up make sure that you're still healthy kinds of topics, which
Mhm.
as you were from the beginning of our conversation, putting your own mask on first, what I hear is a primary for you. And
Mhm.
so as you're moving out of the self-pres space, what I'm hearing is you need to continue to care for yourself first as you move
Mhm.
forward. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we can light that unity candle, so to speak, with others and really merge beautifully, but we're still ourselves also. And that's
Mm,
important that we both allow some interdependence, but also individuation. And of course, you're going to hear my 7 in that, but I think that's most of us have needed all of that, because a 7 could be like, well, I just want to individuate and just have freedom. And I'm not saying that. I'm actually saying we need merging, we need connection heart to heart. And that's what this sexual instinct is about, is really stepping into attraction and deep feelings and keeping it interesting versus just the self-pres routines that we tend to set up and get very boring and to just coupon conversations and relationships. And so for a 369 or just anyone, we need that part of us that gets creative in relationships too and allows ourselves to chance be rejected, but knowing that we can also find beautiful connection. And we've all heard by now some of the Bowlby studies and Mary Ainsworth and others who have tested babies. I know we all hate that these babies had to go through this, but to see how did they do without food and water and survival, and they could really not survive without this instinct of the one-to-one. So I know we said sexual
right.
instinct, but for those of us who are tracking with the label of one-to-one also, it's even just the bonding. Even if we just said this is the bonding instinct or desire, it's essential also. So we're not saying that one is more essential than the other. We're just saying if we could be purists and start somewhere, you'd want to start with the one that feeds you so that you have enough of a window of tolerance to be human, to even have water, to even have food. And then you would really want to connect with others. And even those two instincts are almost symbiotic. You can't have one without the other.
Well, I offer another footnote here, and I will commonly talk about waves in Enneagram. And the last two Enneagram waves have been very hyper spiritual in the way that they've come to the topic. And one of the things I'm thrilled to hear in your language is moving towards the biological. And I'm seeing
Yeah.
that more and more that thoughtful people, especially females who are doing Enneagram work, like I don't mean to gender this, but
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I see a lot of very thoughtful women who are doing the Enneagram work, who are bringing in the science of it all, and
Yes.
saying you are an evolutionary manufactured animal at one level that needs to
Mhm.
be named in terms of how your brain chemistry works and how
Mhm.
type manifests. And in terms
Mhm.
of being an embodied person in this world, you have to name that
Mhm.
because your physicality matters.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
overlapping that with Enneagram theory, I just see that as that's going to be a massive characteristic of everything that we're going to see in the next 10 or 15 years of people doing Enneagram work. And I think that the language that you're using here is just a precursor to what I think is going to be a big trend. And I think it's super helpful. I think it's really important that more people engage Enneagram with the sciences in mind. So,
Me
so I'm
too.
grateful
Oh,
for that element in your work.
oh my gosh, I'm so glad you're doing that same thing. Thank
Well,
you.
man, I'll tell you what we're actually doing because it's bigger than that. So, but
Oh my
that's for later. We
yeah.
await, dear listener, await an announcement in 3 months.
Mm,
Um,
wow.
but I'll tell you offline what we're up to if you're interested.
Oh yeah, love that.
Um, the lastly is these types moving into that social space, and again, it's the case I want to characterize so much of the connecting of 3 6s and 9s looking like it's social. I'm creating spaces for everybody to be safe,
Mm,
successful, and
mhm.
calm. And 3 6s and
Yeah,
9s strike me as hitting that gear
yeah.
pretty cleanly and easily if they want to. That may not they may not be dominant socially, but they can get there even if they're not. Wait, do you have
Yeah.
thoughts?
I do. The 3, 6, and 9 are the inner circle triangle of the Enneagram. And so it's nice to know that once they get moving and rolling, they really do. I think you said it really well. They hit that space so cleanly and they're just able to track with that instinct socially to others so well. They just have such a deep desire to help anyway, all three of those types. And so it's nice to see them climb all the way up, to feel loved, to feel taken care of, and now give out socially. And they do so beautifully. And I think nines add calmness, but also thoughtfulness about the whole group, because nines are part of that justice triad that we're not really going into as much today. But, they are part of the 1, 8, and 9 group of center intelligence who they care deeply about rightness and justice. So when they get to the top of the mountain, you get to see some of that. Like, wow, like you are sharing socially, you are vibrant, you are alive, you're awake. And when a 6 is doing their social work, they're doing that often with really helping groups to join each other and to bring groups together. I have a social group that's just lovely in one of my kids' theater groups, and she's just really gifted there. It's so natural. And then we have our threes who are sharing it often from a platform, how others can rise up because they themselves have risen up. They have found balance. They have found healthy ways of loving and not being codependent in that heart group that they're in. And now they're sharing from a platform of success that is more grounded. And so you're seeing how I'm putting this all together, because if you just have a straight social three who is not connected with the other two instincts, they could be a hot mess. And the same is true for any of us if we're just abandoning any of these other survival desires.
Love that. It's good. Let's move to the 2 5 8s, commonly called the relationists. I suppose my take on that is because they relate to others through what they're offering in
Mhm.
terms of their help, their wisdom, their strength. 2 5s and 8s, in terms of overlap with other psychological theories, 2 5s, 8s expect rejection in relationships.
Mhm.
And that's important to name in terms of what we get from these types, in my view. 2 5s and 8s, in my experience, are the hardest to understand, in part
Mhm.
because they are holding so much back, yet perhaps presenting as though they're fully present.
Mhm.
And so that's where I start with 2s, 5s, and 8s. I
Mhm.
think that the self-pres and these types overlap very cleanly as
Mhm.
well, because it's the case that they're coming to the world not wanting to be rejected. And so, what are your thoughts on self preservation with these three?
I like your take on that, how they're the hardest to understand. I've always felt that about the harmony groups with them, that they're the
Mm-hmm.
hardest to understand. But in general, I could really see that. And so I would name that when they're in their self preserving, sometimes it's a way to hide from the rejection of the world. I almost think that getting them to that is very important, because eights will move so fast that they might forget to go down the mountain and resource. Twos for sure are headed up to do the right thing, to get, to just kind of running around that mountain to take care of others. And then fives, I think, are the most who are practical, logical, objective to say, you know what, I do have to take care of me. And unfortunately, sometimes in their rejection wounds, they may just climb down, do the self-pres thing, and stay down. But either way, all three of these are actually really relational people who have huge hearts, and who, I think people are surprised to hear that about fives, but they're so sensitive. That's why they protect their heart. And it just costs them so much to be relational. And I see you nodding there, and I'm so glad that's resonant with you. And I just think that they do a beautiful job when they allow themselves to take care of themselves, but then to come back out, right? To go rest and then come back out, to know their synergy in relationships. And I think twos, to just even get them to take care of themselves. I already was doing a session with a two today. It's always the theme is you've got to take care of you, and getting that self-pres is great. And of course, we do have some self-pres twos who are really good at that. And sometimes they just want to be taken care of, and they forget to come out and help others. And then we have our eights who, when they get self-pres, can get a bit miserly and very five-like eight. And so they can stay away from helping others too if they're not well. And they can be, to use the Lord of the Rings analogy, a bit like the dwarves, who are just like the dwarves are for the dwarves, like the eights are for the eights. Sorry, I had to throw that in there because I knew you would understand.
It's quite true.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. We did a deep dive. We did 6 episodes on the Lord of the Rings films and typing, and I want to say we landed on Gimli as a 8. It was a very robust debate, but I lost. I lose all the time on these, by the way.
But I have to go back to that and hear that.
It's good times. It's around Christmas. You gotta watch, queue up the extended cut of the Lord of the Rings around Christmas, and so that's when we did it. The thing that hits me as you're talking is that Riso and Hudson point out that the direction of the energy of 2s, 5s, and 8s goes outward at meeting the obstacles that they perceive. 2s are going outward to meet in terms of their shame, 5s with their fear, and 8s with their anger. They're all protecting something inside, that because so much of their energy goes outward, that internal life can get neglected. This is one of the reasons, as you were talking, one of the huge myths in Enneagram world is that 5s aren't emotional, and it's entirely wrong. 5s are feeling 5s are action repressed. They are not feeling repressed. They just haven't told you their feelings, and that's on you, not on them. The fact that 2s, 5s, and 8s aren't sharing their inner life is about their type and how they communicate. And in the words of Jackie Contessa, who's a 2, she says that she appears all in, but she's half out as a 2. And it looks like the 2s are giving you all their stuff. It looks like the 8s giving you all their stuff, and they're really not. They're holding back. And that's because of how they are in the world and how they're addressing their underlying feeling. That's what I was hearing in your language.
Yeah.
Moving to the sexual instinct, it seems like the bonding ends up being, for 2s, 5s, and 8s, very limited. I think 2s, 5s, and 8s have the smallest circles of trust. 2s look like they're there for everybody, and they're not. They have a small circle that they're truly vulnerable with. So 2 5s and so 2 8s. But that sexual gear is there for them. That's how I would read those types. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I really like that. And I have heard a lot of 2s say it's not everybody that it goes out to. It's just my people. And I think that for sexual 2s, especially when they have a self-pres component as well, and I think a lot of them do, is they want to be that femme fatale, or that guy who gets all the girls, because they want to feel safe, and that's the way they feel safe. And so we have to say, every one of us, even within our sexual instinct, also wants to survive. It's another survival instinct. It's another safety instinct. So thereby there's self-pres within that. And that's why these 3 instincts are so hard to parse out. But just hear me, when somebody is mostly the sexual, they're trying to feel safe through relationships if they're a 2. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's going to be these pointed relationships who can resource them, and they can seduce somebody with their two-ness of being compliant. But like you said, they're holding a lot back, but they will use that to survive. And so they'll nurture, they'll lay on a lot of seductions, whatever the kind of seductions. Doesn't have to be sexual seductions. It could be, just comforting or whatever, but it's very loving and giving. And so, but it's often giving to get if it's not healthily balanced because they're not doing their self-care. And then with eights, there's a sense of the right thing is for me to get my goals. If I'm a sexual eight and I don't want anyone to step in the way of that, I have to dominate. And so often they will dominate a partner's goals. And not that they don't care, but it's just they're so passionate and lusty that
Mm-hmm.
their own ambitions can take over the partnership, and they can truly snuff out a relationship. And there's so many more layers we could go into it with that, because eights often go and retreat in their five, or they go in their helper two, but they need to really access all their arrows, because if they abandon a part of themselves, they can do very cruel things to just give the justice for themselves and not the other. And then I would say the five, who's sexual, of course, is looking for that safety through the group of, we'll give to each other, but we'll also I don't mean through the group in terms of like the social five. I mean like somebody else outside of me. And I will find through that lens of the other, probably just one. But even sometimes I've seen fives. Why I say group is multiple crushes, multiple fantasies, multiple lovers, of like that person will meet my needs, and having some even in the rafters, whether in imagination or in real life, to actually bring that ideal partnership forward of we'll take care of each other. Hopefully we'll do so in a way that we're symbiotic, and that we don't, I keep using that word, but um we don't have to even have our own, like we'll just know, instead of constantly having to engage. A five is content knowing my partner and I get each other, we're authentic together, and we can still go back and retreat. But I need to find these ideal others, or maybe just one, who can help me. But once they find the one, and then they find out everything about that person, and that person's not perfect, sometimes they land with another ideal. So I just went on a huge riff about fives.
I would want to affirm a lot of that. And just, I suppose, and this is not, this is just my gut, is that sexual fives may come to relationships with another with almost an, this is my person. It's almost like the partner is an asset for protection at some level. And that's
I
just worth
love
noting.
that.
Um,
Yes, I love how ones are good clarifiers. You just
well,
clarified this huge.
that is not my skill set. So if I appreciate it, I'm going to take the compliment though.
I think body types are, though. I feel like you guys are so good at being like, okay, so this is this huge thing of what you just said. I just brought it down. So thank you.
Well, I'll take it. The twos, fives, and eights, as they move into social space, I think that twos, fives, and eights can be the easiest to see in excess. That is, their motive is really coming out in I'm the helper, I'm the wise one, I'm the one who's strong. And I feel like twos, fives, and eights in social spaces, the fears that we all have really can be seen most. This is the place I think twos, fives, and eights actually you can see what's going on inside of them. That the being unwanted for the two, the fearing being incompetent for the five, the fear of being controlled for the eight in social spaces. I think you see that. I don't think that's true of all the types, but for twos, fives, and eights, I think it's a lot more clear in social spaces. Do you have thoughts on these types in social?
Yeah, I really like that. I have not thought about that, but that's very interesting. And I think it resonates, at least as I think about it initially. And I guess when they come to that space as such relational types, I think they come in a way to help the world. I really do, because they
Yes.
really are at the heart of it, caring so deeply about others. So you may have a five creating a mega internet platform. I had a five client who was once trying to create a safe internet space. I know a lot of twos, and I know everyone here probably does, of just helping the world, that are very social and they have so
Mhm.
much to give and they want to protect so much. And then we have a lot of eights who also, when they get to that social space, are huge givers. They want to teach the underdog, lift others up. So they just come in with such love. And I feel like those are such beautiful spots to watch each of these types rise up into. Of course, we do know the five gets group oriented in that other sense of like, I'm going to probably do this with different groups so that I don't overwhelm myself. And that's okay as long as
Mhm.
they stay balanced. And the twos have to look at, oh my gosh, like make sure I don't forget my self care when I get up here, because I could just get lost in the giving. And the same thing for the eight. They can get so lost in the doing that they could lose really their heart. But I do think all three of them they do have huge hearts when they get to that social space. So I like how you said you see them really showing up with more of their whole selves.
I feel like I'm saying kind of the opposite, but I think your point is really important. That is the opposite being, I think you can perceive their excess a little bit much. But I had not thought of what you were saying. Twos, fives, and eights, if they actually give you their heart, they are all in.
Yeah.
Like if you're in
Mhm.
the inner circle, I heard one eight say, if you're in my inner circle, not only will I kill a person for you, I know where to bury the body. It's that kind of intensity of care
Mhm.
for
Yes.
the person. And of course, she's not a
Oh,
murderer, but
right.
the but there is something about once you're in
Mhm.
past the shield, that
Mhm.
person has taken you into themselves at a different kind of level. It's what I see with those
Yes, I have
three types.
seen
So
that. I love that. Yes, all of them. I can picture all of them in this very biological space, just
yeah,
loving their people and willing to do anything for them.
this is the opposite side, I should say. So I always feel like I'm negative coming with twos, fives, and eights and saying they expect rejection. The opposite side to that coin is once you are past the shield,
Yep.
this is a place of depth and warmth and
Yeah.
ingratiation, and I will do
Mhm.
anything for you if you
Mhm.
pass the standards, that are set, as
Mhm.
it were. So
Mhm.
not so for ones, fours, and sevens. We function differently when we come to relationships.
Right.
Um, Ones, fours, and sevens pull people into the emotional life, into action, into their thoughts. Self preservation for ones, fours, and sevens strikes me as a balancing move and not very intuitive for these types. What's your take on
Mm.
the idealists and self preservation?
Yeah, I think that it's a spot that can get very sticky. I never thought of that, about how it's not very intuitive for these types, but I have noticed that when a seven, one, and four go to that space, we can get very perfectionistic. We can get
Mm-hmm.
very hard on ourselves. We just want everyone, including ourselves, to be safe. And there's this layer of perfectionism that is hard because we're idealists. So we'll take that into like, okay, I have to be ideal with every little thing in my life, down to the littlest survival mechanism, or whatever it is. I'm a seven, my daughter's a four. We were at our Pure Barre class this morning, and she's like, I was noticing how fast you were going in a good way. And I was like, we were both self-pres, by the way. That's our lead
Mm-hmm.
instinct. And I was like, but I was noticing how slow you were going and how perfectly you were doing the moves. And the teacher was complimenting that. And we're like nitty-gritty perfectionism here in this group. And I know you get it as a one.
I do.
And so we want to do it all well. But it's just a lot. And so I think that it's, like you said, helpful, because if we're running at the top all the time and we're always like, I've got to do my next thing, we're going to miss this important layer of like putting our oxygen mask on, if you will, for that boring analogy that we all need sometimes. And I guess I'm just reminding ones, fours, and sevens, if you're here with us, please don't give up on this spot. Just perhaps relax a bit in it and let yourself remind yourself it's okay to rest, and just rest, and to do nothing, and to not save the world right now, right?
What I hear there, I want to set fours aside for a second because they're going to be an outlier in the thing that I'm going to say. But what I'm hearing there is Self-pres for me ends up being a lot about going to my stress move.
Mm.
And I get introspective in my stress move about my emotional self. And what I assume is that it would be similar for the seven in terms of the stress move, going into one space that I want to get things, especially high side stress move. I want to get
Mm-hmm.
things ordered. I want them
Yeah.
to feel good. I want to be more present
Mm-hmm.
and care for myself before I go outward again, which would be the normal wheelhouse, I assume, for the seven,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
is that the that recovery, not recovery, but like regeneration and self-investment
Mm-hmm.
for the seven and for myself. It looks much more like engaging my stress move, I suppose. Do you
Mm-hmm.
relate to that?
Yeah, I do. I think that I'm not sure, like you said, about the four because they might not do that, but definitely I go to that one if I'm really in that space of I need to really, like I'm talking like, let's get serious, take care of myself, then I
Mm-hmm.
will go to that one. But in the Enneagram laws of seven, one is my last move and my stress move. So I don't often do that very well. When I
Mm-hmm.
do, I feel so peaceful. I'm a minimalist mom. I'm, allowing the healthy one to be part of my story. But that's a really intentional move. Now, I will say the old ways of like seven going up and out, it still hits me every day because I'm still a seven, but it hasn't served me that well for probably a good 15 years. So I don't even like try to do that anymore. I try to do the opposite because it was just trashing me and my body to try to just do all those things that sevens do. So I'm much more in that self-pres state. It's a little more
Yeah.
boring. I have to make sure I'm not overly routine and perfectionistic, but I'm right there with you that it's an important space. Is that how you feel as a one?
I get a lot of stability from how my physical body feels. And when I get
Mhm.
into self-pres space, I'm not doing necessarily a stress move. Sometimes I'm doing a self-assessment. Am I good in the world? Am I happy? Is a very
Mhm.
physical question for me. And so when thinking about
Mhm.
exercise or order habits for the seven, I assume that's more of a engaging some of that those one tools. For me, habit and order are foundational for me saying I feel good in the world
Mhm.
in terms of my
Mhm.
rhythms. So,
Yeah. That makes sense as a
um,
body type too.
yeah,
It's so physical for you.
right. Yeah, I am going to self assess almost entirely based on how internally physically feel and what am I exerting my will into the world in ways that are have efficacy and move things
Mhm.
forward.
Yeah, that's so
and
good.
and so like the language of happiness is probably gonna, for me, is gonna send her in terms of those as targets.
Mhm. That
For
makes
two,
sense.
for fours, I think fours actually live in that withdrawn space. They're probably doing a lot of internal work. Self-preservation for fours, I imagine fours are going to more easily have that step of how am I feeling inside and
Mhm.
consider myself first. I don't think that's a vice for the four. I think that's natural for the four. How am I
Yeah.
feeling is just going to be.
Mhm.
So anyway, fours and self-preservation. I don't know if you have a final word on that before we move.
I think you nailed it that they do some self assessment. I do think they're very loving. And um, I agree. They need to love themselves. So they do that if they're able to. I know that space is often called tenacity, that in that sense that they can get really scrappy and even sabotage themselves a little bit when they're not as healthy. But I think when they're healthy, they're asking, how am I feeling? I'm not sitting in my envy all the time. What do I
Mm-hmm.
need to get moving? And they're good at feelings. So it's just nice to see how they are one of the few Enneagram spaces that really can bring us a little slower and into feelings.
Mm-hmm. That's well said. Moving to the sexual instinct, ones, fours, and sevens. It's again, it strikes me these three pull people into relationship. And so the sexual instinct is going to get merged with that. And a lot of the forward thrust of relationships for these types is going to come here for me. So I listened to your dialogue with Dr. Sam Greenberg, and she was talking about how 4, 7s, and 8s end up being the most assertively sexual of the types. And this was what was going through my head. Of course they are. The 4s and the 7s, at least on this front, are pulling people, the individual in front of them, pulling that individual into here's what we should think about, pulling that person into here's the emotional vast experience that we can have together. And for the ones, it's, hey, let's go do something amazing together.
Yeah. Yeah, you nailed it. And with having my husband, my daughter, and I, it's like and we have 2 other kids, but they're more different spaces. It's like those are so, like, I see them in my face every day, all day.
All
And
three
so,
of you are idealists? You got
yeah.
a 1, 4, 7?
Yeah. And so the 3, and she's our oldest, but like her and I can literally, we're actually the same tri-type. My daughter is the same tri-type as me, but she's leads with her 4. And so she and I can get so lost in everything you said. I'm pulling her constantly into thought. She's pulling me constantly into feelings. And we have to have good boundaries to get anything done. And that will come with my husband, who's the one saying, okay, let's do something. Let's not just think it all out and feel it all out. Let's get moving. And then we're all kind of brought into that space. And the other 2 are more earthy types, so they're ready to get going too. They're not like wanting to go into these deep philosophical realms that the 3 of us can get into. But like you said, the ones of this group, once we get more into that sexual realm, we're like, this is your bread and butter. You can speak to that better than me, but this is right where you get people moving and you get people doing healthy things. You want to change them to do better things. Is that right?
Yeah. If I get a person alone in a corner, then they are unfortunately in a terrible spot because I will be trying to sell them on the thing that we can do together. And so,
That's great, though. I love that.
but that's really common for me. So in terms of how I naturally connect with another person. So if somebody's willing to go there, what's interesting, if somebody's willing to go there, then normally a lot of the energy for relationship is coming out of me. Even when I'm with 3, 7s, and 8s, I'm generally the one leading, but that's because of how I connect. So
It's neat.
Lastly is the social space for 1s, 4s, and 7s, which it strikes me as this is an interesting space for me. This is the place that I feel least strong, and so I would love to hear your experience of 1s, 4s, and 7s in social gear.
Well, I think each one has something to teach, and that's what social is often all about, is the rightness. And so when ones get social, they want to help others to be good and to do the right thing and to see what they can teach the world. And each of them wants to have a prescriptive way. Like you said, often as a 1, this is the way I do it. When my husband and I do our own therapy work with our own therapist, he says, I came from a family of drinking and drugs, and I needed to find God. I needed to find healthy. I had no structure whatsoever. And so that's his way. And somebody else would say, well, I didn't do that through faith. I did that through a different lens. But they're going to have a way, and it's going to be very convincing because it worked for them. And they were able to find a bunch of other people socially who it worked for as well, to lead, to give examples. And we need examples in culture, especially men right now. We could talk all day about that, how there's a lot of men flailing with no good social examples. So social 1s are good about finding social examples. Let's do this. Let's find a formula. Let's follow it. Let's be reasonable and moderate with it. I think 7s are looking to make a change socially to bring joy, to share light. We love themes of light and darkness. So we want to bring light through the world. We're learning to sit with our darkness. That will never be a super easy space because it feels like death to us. But it's the gear on a 7 who's socially able to climb up is a bit healthier if they've, like I said, done some relationship work, which is hard and painful for 7s, done some growing up work, which is we're id focused in that space on the Freudian scale, but most people know that term, just playful, childlike. And it, like I said, we can get very lost if we get down to that self-pres and stay there in our 5 arrow. So getting us to a social space is a good thing for sevens, but it's also important that we don't just stay there all the time with the new shiny object socially, and that we actually come back for balance. And then for 4s, I think they want to teach the world about authenticity when they get social, to say you're loved no matter what. And you are, you're not disabled if whatever, or neurodiverse, like we're all neurodiverse, or we're disabled, or, we're bringing others to the awareness that we are beautifully different. And that is, of course, I'm presenting this as an ideal, but we do want to know, what am I like at my best? So for those social 4s listening, I love that about you, that you help us to know we don't have to hide our pain and our worst, that we can show it and still be loved. And of course, we know sometimes when they're not as healthy, or maybe just being authentic, sometimes a social 4 is going to project all their pain onto the world and not necessarily have a read on whether somebody else can handle that. So it's the work of all these. I kind of named some of the work for each of them to do. 1, stop judging. 7s, slow down a bit. And then 4s, try to read how much your audience can handle if you're in that social space. Because wow, we sometimes like that curtain pulled back just a little bit, and 4s are willing to like rip it all open and expose it all. So yeah, that's my thought on those 3.
I think that's a fantastic lens. Social space for the idealist being a teacher role. What was going through my mind is that these types need to get the permission of the group, but if they do, they can take their hand and we're off. There's a Peter Pan image, especially for 7s. We're going somewhere, that we're taking the group with us. So 7s, in my experience, love being teachers of high school students, or even like youth pastor person, but the thing that actually was hitting me was how often filmmakers are 1s, 4s, and 7s, and they're like, I want to cast a vision of how reality works, and I'm going to take your hand, I'm going to bring you in it. So somebody like Steven Spielberg, I think, is a 7, and I think he wants to take you some spaces idealistically. I want to say some things that are hard about divorce in some of his films, or about racism, anti-Semitism in some of his films, but also let me get on the bike. Here's the alien, and we're flying across the moon, and that, those sorts of the ideals that come out in terms of the connection socially for these types. That's what I see. So
that's beautiful. I love that. And they're the heaven triad too. Yeah. So like the heavenward triad, where it's like the 3, 6, 9's like the earth triad. So coming back to that mountain analogy, we like to sit on that top space, but it's nice. It's nice to teach when we can.
Chris, this has been one of my favorite conversations I've had this year. I did not expect that. And it's mostly because I don't like talking about the instincts as much as I should. But it's been a delight meeting you. And I'm so grateful that you came on our show. And I'm wishing you well, cheering for you writing a book, which may come out sometime. When's your next publication?
Well, I am turning it in early 2026, and it probably will be on the shelves early 2027. But I have my other book. If anyone's like, I want to read something with her now, I do have the book that's already published.
And that's Enneagram in Marriage?
Yes, the Enneagram in Marriage, your guide to thriving together in your unique pairing.
Have a podcast with the same name, and you have a fairly robust Instagram presence. Yeah, is that where people are connecting with you most?
Yes, exactly. That's where it all started.
Bang. And you do I want to say you do coaching of some sort? Yeah.
I do. Yeah, I started off as a counselor, and I've been doing work with couples for about 2 decades. So now I do some coaching, and I stay mostly full, but sometimes I can take a new one. I also have a staff of people that work with me locally as well as online.
Bang. All right, excellent. And those are the best places to get in touch with you if folks want that sort of thing.
Yes, perfect.
It's been a delight. Much love to you, family, and in your future. I'll be cheering for you, and I'm looking forward to connecting with you again.